Okay, so we have come to chapter 30 in my story. I had a rather shocking revelation yesterday. I was thumbing through how much more of the story there is. There were 42 chapters originally. And I was like, well, okay, how did I end this? Because it's a vague memory. It was 10 or 12 years ago, since I really looked at this thing. So I'm thumbing through this binder that the cat is sleeping on right now. And it only goes to chapter 37. Yeah. So the ending of the story is missing. I just assumed that the whole story was there in that binder. But it isn't. It ends at chapter 37. Luckily, most of the really important climactic stuff is included in the last chapters that are there, but there's stuff that's missing. So I have a bit of a problem. Not a huge bit of a problem. What I find is I've been rewriting a lot of these chapters anyway, because now I'm going back and I'm seeing them with new eyes and I'm thinking, damn. Some of it's just over the top melodrama. I feel faint. I think I'm going to pass out. Stuff. It's like, okay, well, we don't need to have that. We'll take that. It's a little too dramatic. And so I'm doing a lot of cutting out a lot of stuff that's just, if I roll my eyes when I'm reading it, I know the reader's going to be rolling their eyes going, yeah, So it's good to read this now that so much time has passed. I'm reading this going, okay, so I think it's a huge improvement for the story that I'm taking out a lot of this whatever, But so I'm trying to look at it as a positive. From how I remember the ending of Mornius, I wasn't really happy with the ending. And this will give me a chance to make a new ending. I'm thinking I have enough information from the chapters that I do have to write a whole different ending, and probably a better ending. But there will come a point where there might not be. There might be a lull, because I'm going to be writing from scratch the last several chapters of this story. Just heads up, that's still a long ways away. Because I've been breaking the chapters into smaller portions because they're too long. So in the end, this is going to have more than 42 chapters. It's going to be, I'm thinking, more like 50 chapters. So I'm a long ways to the point where I'm writing from scratch, but this story is going to have a different ending than the original. It's going to have me writing it as I write now kind of ending than instead of what I had before. And again, I'm trying not to freak out. I'm trying to think, you know what? It's probably going to be a better ending. It's probably going to be better written. I think it'll be a better ending. So just something that I came across last night and had to suffer through a little bit of hyperventilating. Oh my gosh, but we're good. We're good. We have enough I think we have enough to make it work. So anyway, my phone is ringing, so onward and upward, chapter 30. Song of Mornius, chapter 30. Ice gleamed above the Shikaya, on the high vertical banks flanking the river. Spangled with sunlight, it shimmered on the river below, twisted solid in places where the water was quiet enough, away from the black thrashing current. Galen trembled. Squinting, he studied the narrow ice ledge between the river and the gorgeous stone wall. On this the Shan had journeyed before. He could see the scoop marks of their treks, the frozen dun scattered in frosted lumps. Shivering, he fiddled with his cloak, pulled the blue wool forward around his chest. Already he longed to rejoin the Eris village, to rest and feel safe again, even for a little while. Sails! Avalar gasped from beside him as the ice cracked beneath her. Galen jumped back, his right hand gripping the reins of his shan. Trembling, he turned to the beast, steadied himself against its powerful shoulder. "Galen," Tarek said softly. He nodded and then mounted as Kildoran had shown them, throwing his right leg over at the last moment and easing back down. The shan, unimpressed, rubbed its bony cheek along the rocky wall, its tufted tail lashed once, whipping his calf. Guided by Argus, Tarek prodded his beast along the river's icy shelf. Behind him followed Silva and Roth, and then a grim-faced Dren Avram, who led a riderless shan behind him. Galen trailed after, clicking his tongue and willing his shan forward. He had no idea how to nudge it or where. With a hard slap on its rump, Avalar sent his beast scrambling. Galen yelped and threw himself forward, gripping the shan with his knees and then his arms. Holding on with everything he could, Galen huddled over the creature's stiff mane. He tensed as the ice snapped. His shan shuffled on unconcernedly, swinging each leg sideways and then forward. It seemed to Galen that the creature measured each step. At intervals it held one foot lifted high, while hopping forward on the other three. Above, Galen heard Roth's voice. "They're smarter than horses," Tarek's soft answer drifted back. Galen fought to listen, to make out the words. The voices kept his mind off the hungry fall to his left, or the fatally cold water far below. "Fear not," said Avalar close behind him. Her big hand patted his shoulder. With a grimace, Galen closed his eyes. Side to side, the shan's wide back swayed him. The voices continued softly, fading. With Avalar's hand upon his shoulder, Galen felt himself drift, felt his fear melt away. Again he hovered between the stars, in absolute cold and breathless beauty. Within his grasp his sun flared white. Then he plunged like a comet, fire blazing through absolute darkness. His weakness dragged him down against his will, imprisoning him beneath the hard lid that was Talankai's sky, magical planet. But I didn't slay, he thought, recalling his desperate need to kill Malian. Hurting people is wrong. He nodded, feeling again the gentle rocking motion. He marveled at how relaxed he was, even now, in this prison of flesh. A sudden bugle jolted his slumber, forcing him back to the surface and to Galen. Shivering, he leaned forward as much as he dared, seeing Galen clutch at the shan's black mane and wrestle his gaze into focus. Blocking his beast were the 5 other shan. An ancient flood had flattened the gorge, allowing the path to widen. Here his companions had dismounted. Standing together at the edge of the bank, they stared down at the river. Avalar stepped to his side, her big hand extended to help him. Galen, nodding his gratitude, caught at her wrist and dropped from the little beast. "What is it?" he asked. In fear he eyed the glistening downward-sloping ice. Any kind of misstep would send him sliding toward the edge. Avalar shrugged and stepped behind him, gripping his elbows. "I know not," she told him softly. "Shall we go and see?" He took short, rapid steps, sliding repeatedly as he neared the others. Yet through it all she held him upright, his feet safely beneath him. "Tarek?" Panting, Galen stopped beside Roth and peered down. A gray shape sprawled below, its head and neck immersed in the river, its long legs twisted and sheathed with ice. Tarek cleared his throat. He turned away and rubbed at his face. "It's Hawk," he said in a husky voice. "Vurgen's horse. Vurgen's—" "No!" Galen started for the drop-off, pulled at Avalar's restraining hands as he neared the edge. "I've got to help him," he heard himself say. "Vurgen would want me to." Avalar's hands dragged him back, pressed him down against the ice. All around him the world was spinning. Voices shouted above his head. He trembled as his power roused in his chest, erupting from his very bones. This was his purpose, to heal, not destroy. For this he was made to exist. "Hawk is dead, Galen!" Tarek sat on his chest, braving his fire. "Galen, listen to me! There's nothing we can do!" Lying with the cold creeping into him, Galen stared up at his friend through sudden tears. "No, Tarek!" he cried. "I healed him! It's the one thing I've done right!" "Don't be ridiculous," Tarek said softly, staring down. His gaze, red-rimmed with exhaustion, gleamed with grief of his own. He eased his weight off, then rolled to his knees. "Avalar?" Trembling, Galen closed his eyes as the giant gathered him up, cradled him in her arms. Effortlessly she lifted him and stood. "He needs rest and food, Leader Tarek. Hulrum drains him." "I know it, Giant. We'll rest when we can, when I feel it's safe, but not now." Galen saw Tarek glance deliberately at the high, steep walls around them. "Come," said Tarek. Already half drowsing, Galen gazed beyond Avalar's look of understanding to Argus's ghost shine above her head. Felrina groaned as the knock came again on her door, rattling it against its hinges. She rolled from the bed she had come to loathe, glaring through the darkness. "What?" "Priestess Felrina?" came a young man's voice. The latch lifted slowly. She continued to glare as the door cracked open. She snorted, recognizing the face, then collapsed back on the bed of padded straw. "Gulgren, leave me alone. I'm sick. Go bother someone else." "But—" Gulgren, blinking rapidly, squeezed himself through her little doorway. Wringing his hands, he stared at her. "What is he doing?" he whispered. "You've been here all day. He wouldn't let me in. Why is he keeping you here?" She groaned at the pain in her stomach, rubbed at the raw bruises on her face. I don't know. Just go." "Priestess, he's very angry you're not there. He started the ritual himself." Felrina started where she lay. "Who did? Menz?" Her young apprentice, his back pressed against the wall, bobbed his head. "Yes, mistress, Method Menz. Oh, Felrina, it's horrible. I know it's necessary, but "Yes, it is," she said gravely. "Everything we do is very necessary and important for our future." She sat up, waving a hand at her nearby lantern. "Light that thing, Gulgren. I need to get dressed." He leaped to obey, his hand shaking hard as he pressed lighter candle to oil. Quickly, Felrina shrugged on her tunic to cover her bruises. Choking down the taste of vomit, she fumbled for her black leggings. "What is he doing?" She glanced toward the boy. She had never thought Menz would be this bold. Without the blazing stone, how could he know when the pain is too much? The young priest hugged his chest. "He doesn't care. He's using 4 attendants, priestess." She paused, her leggings half on. 4? Swallowing hard, he nodded. "Then he's a fool!" Felrina stomped on her boots. "Doesn't he know? Too much pain stops the heart and ends the ritual prematurely. That doesn't feed Malian well enough. Only slow death will." Grabbing her blazing stone staff, she bolted from her chamber and raced down the granite tunnel. Gulgren, puffing hard, struggled at her side to keep up. "I don't think he cares," Gulgren gasped. "He's angry about losing his army, and you haven't been making him warriors." "He knows why," she raged fiercely. "Bastard!" She swung down through a hole to the level below, then sprinted back the way she had come, descending gradually as the damp tunnel narrowed. Already she could hear the agonized screams. "That's too much!" she panted. "Menz!" The black-robe stepped from the shadows. Smiling, he arched his brows. "Yes?" She jerked to a stop, panting like the young man at her side. "What in the blackest hell are you doing?" she blurted. "Stop it, Menz! It's too much!" "Malian doesn't agree," said Menz. He lifted his hand into the torchlight, and Felrina found herself staring at a miniature bone saw, its blade a knuckle length long. "Come see for yourself." Menz seized her arm and dragged her, struggling against him, into the chamber. Screams shedded her eardrums. In their chairs, the other priests looked back at her, clearly disturbed, their eyes widened with horror and dismay. Steeling herself, Felrina turned her gaze to the altar, and the older man stretched spread eagle between the 4 attendants. His screams were rhythmic now, in time with their little saws. Men's hissed in her ear. "I can do this because I don't have a heart," he whispered. "Mine's been eaten, devoured completely in Malian's name." She jerked from his side, strode quickly between the wooden benches and the faces of her peers. Approaching the altar, she raised her staff. "Finish it!" she screamed at her attendant first. "Do it now!" The nearest man glanced up, his victim's half-severed ankle flopping wetly in his grasp. With a clench of will, Felrina lighted her staff, set the blazing stone burning. "Do it, or I'll fry the poor man myself until there's nothing left of him, or any of you!" "Poor man?" Men shouted the words mockingly at her back. "On the contrary, Felrina, he is honored by this." She whirled and sent fire screaming at Men's, blasting the floor at his feet into rubble. "Bastard!" she screamed. "Rapist! It's a lie! Our Lord Malian has promised us a whole new world, hasn't he? A world for humans alone. Well, what about him?" Wildly she gestured toward the altar. "Where is his new world?" She was sobbing now with rage, the blazing stone aimed at Men's heart. "What about all the others we've slaughtered? How do we know they'll be reborn? What about my father, Men's? Will he share in our good fortune? Will I ever see him again? No!" She turned in a circle, fighting to face the gray robes, the attendants, method men's. "All this is wrong!" Felrina dropped her staff. Unsheathing her little knife, she sprang to stand beside the altar. The 4 attendants moved from their positions, their bloody hands outstretched, begging her to stop. She paused, choking with tears as she probed the sacrifice's chest. Then, sure of her position, she slammed her blade in at an angle, ramming it under his ribs and to his heart. "No!" Rock splintered from the force of Malian's cry. From the back of the room, Men's howled. Felrina stood gasping, staring downward as her knife hilt quivered in her hands. The man beneath her went rigid, eyes staring. His chest heaved once as he convulsed. Hands seized her from behind, threw her to the floor. "Take her!" Men's yelled. He shoved at the attendants, striking them across the back with the side of his staff. "I don't care what you do!" Felrina nodded as her attendant first knelt. Trembling, she rose with him, his bloody hand on her left shoulder. "I'm going to be sick," she whispered. "Get me out of here." Method Men's faced the altar, his left arm braced against it as he hacked in fury at the corpse. "That's right," he snapped. "Get her to her room. I've got her staff now. The blazing stone is mine." Curtly, Men's gestured to the attendant beside her. "She feeds Malian next. I want her prepared at once. You see to it. Understand?" The lead attendant nodded. Felrina felt the man gently take her arm with his other hand. "Priestess, come." She lifted her head, sucking in breath. In a daze, she stared at the man beside her. He squeezed her arm. "Come." Galen stood shivering where Avalar had left him. He stood on the foot of Mount Alliance white slopes, on what Avalar had called Pony's Peak. Beside him, the Shikaya River left a vicious gash through the mountain's wide flank. It was a cut that bled slowly, black water oozing across the star-brightened landscape below. "I feel so small," he whispered to himself. He blinked at the darkened valley, at the hills and patches of forest. Through this they would have to travel, hiding themselves as best they could. Beside him, his shan ducked its head to eat snow. Galen turned to the pony-sized beast. Around him the others rested. Dren Abram sat with his back against an outcropping of ice, his right arm covering his scarred cheek. Avalar hunched over her sword, cleaning the blade with melting snow. Tarek moved among the shan, his breath pluming in the frigid air. With him strode Roth. Galen, rested now from his long sleep in Avalar's arms, watched how Roth mimicked Tarek's posture and stride. He found himself wondering about the cocky young man he barely knew. "You have changed much, Warder Halram," a voice said. Galen turned to find Argus hovering beside him. The ghost floated upright with his shifting cloud of green light, his meaty arms crossed over the emblazoned hawk on his breastplate. With a frown, Argus reached out, tapping his forehead with a fleshless finger. "Are you still in there, my friend?" Horum smiled as Galen, still relaxed from his long rest, sank back among his private thoughts. "Of course," he said to Argus, "I am here, and in the staff also." "Ah!" Argus reclined on his back, his phantom eyes on the moonless sky. "I will miss our talks," Horum told him softly. He blinked at his friend, at a man he had come to know well during his first battle against Malian. "I will have beauty where I go, but much isolation. Warders observe, that is all." "Perhaps not." Argus smiled and closed his eyes. "I like to think I will visit you. I am a ghost, after all." "I was alone before," Horum told him. "I remember it well. Your eternity rests on a different plane than mine, Lord Argus. Though I do believe after I am free at last," he sighed and lowered Galen's head to stare at the snow, "I will still retain contact with Galen here, through the staff." Argus wheeled in a circle. Horum smiled as again the ghost poked Galen's forehead. "You mean this one will become my only connection to you?" Galen blinked to clear his vision and found himself nodding slowly for no reason. Chagrined, he smiled at the ghost, and Argus, staring back, returned his nod. "Home again, gone again," the ghost said softly, "jiggity-jig." Galen watched him rise slowly above the treetops, his arms spread as if to hug the stars. His face, when Galen saw it, gleamed silver with phantom tears.